Good morning and welcome back to our discussion on the current state of AI use within the infrastructure sector. Bentley recently carried out a survey in collaboration with Pinsent Masons, Mott MacDonald, Turner Townsend to gain insights into the current effects of AI on the built environment. As a result of this collaboration, we've produced a white paper. That paper is entitled The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on the Built Environment. And this paper highlights the findings in relation to AI, especially around readiness, risk and return. But before we get into that, I'd like to start the discussion and look at some high-level findings. So, 78% of the respondents found themselves in early stages of adoption. And those early stages are still when we aren't 100% clear on what AI is going to evolve and bring in its capabilities. 68% of the respondents have AI policies in place. However, project controls and other factors are putting AEC firms at risk. And 38% of the respondents anticipate that over half their projects will incorporate AI inside the next 3 years. However, this sector is known for being cautious in approach and embracing new pieces of software. So, today's panel discussion, I want to explore the survey's findings in greater detail and provide insights into the current state of AI with inside infrastructure. And to help me out, I would like to welcome to the stage Anne-Marie from Pinsent Masons, Guy from Turner Townsend, and YJ from Mott MacDonald. First off, welcome, and thank you for joining us at YII Infrastructure 2025. Anne-Marie, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Pinsent Masons?
Hi everyone, great to be here. I'm Anne-Marie Friel. I'm a partner at global law firm Pinsent Masons. For me personally, I've been helping stakeholders to manage the risks associated with construction and infrastructure delivery for over a quarter of a century now. But in terms of bringing me here today, I've got a particular expertise in collaboration and how we can structure contractual relationships in order to get parties to collaborate more effectively. About 2023, 2024, the UK Digital Twins Hub asked me to lead a working group where we were looking at how we could structure operating models designed to drive governance and trust so that we could set up more connected digital twin projects. And I've also been very involved in recent years in looking at how we can drive sustainable development through infrastructure and construction projects.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Guy, yourself?
Yeah, hi all. Guy Beaumont, I'm the digital lead at Turner Townsend for infrastructure. I look after a team of technology, data and AI professionals whose primary focus really is about delivering and integrating digital solutions that improve the performance of major projects and asset portfolios. With a focus mostly in the UK, but sort of an increasingly sort of global reach.
Lovely, thank you, Guy. YJ, can you tell us about yourself and your role at Mott MacDonald?
Yes. Hi, my name is YJ from Mott MacDonald. My role is mainly focusing on building AI technical foundations. So we do a lot of experimentations within Mott MacDonald, especially for enterprise-wise. And in order to go to upscale responsibly and securely, I try to ensure the technical excellence in our enterprise-wide solutions. And also I build AI pathways for people so they can adopt and use it in their daily basis with confidence and responsibly.
Lovely, thank you all. So let's start, shall we, with some of the survey findings. And I want to really start with AI readiness, because that's really at the forefront of it. So YJ, can I come to you first? Where are you seeing the most credible first wins around the use of AI?
Right, so when we define AI as comprehensive as including such as statistical learning as well as predictive analytics, also traditional machine learning such as regression models, I think the use of AI and its success has not been only limited to recent occasions. It has been going around quite some time, such as predictive analytics and anomaly detection in asset management, as well as demand forecasting as well. But if we include emerging technology that happened recently, and that really brought us a big boom and scale and adoption awareness in the industry, then probably the most likely wins, I think, is coming from document automation. It's relatively smaller risk, and also if we look at it's a technical perspective, the document automation largely rely on natural language processing as well as small and large language models. And they're relatively mature, have been well tested across many use cases, whether that's a summarization, key information extraction, as well as document classifications, not only within the built environment, but also outside a built environment across many industries. So we see increasing number of case studies with providing the practical value. Also, the document automation, they're relatively easier to integrate into our existing workflows. And also, we tend to see, in many cases, it's also relatively easier to see and trace understanding the reasoning behind. As an example, let's say if we are just summarizing or classification, finding some sort of themes in a given document, we can ask generative AI capability to provide the reasoning behind. If we are using natural language processing, often we know what sort of kind of mathematical equation have been used to understand the semantic side of computation. So we can understand, make it possible when it comes to human review to understand and justify the decision making. So for these reasoning, I think it's relatively the first wins.
I mean, actually, you said some couple of good key points there, the wins and everything. And to Guy, I want to come to you now, sort of more from that practical action, and now sort of that sort of delivery side. How do organisations move away from piloting that you've heard about to actually now picking up solutions on larger projects, but more importantly, make it repeatable at scale?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Mark. And we do see organisations stuck in this kind of piloting cycle. And actually taking AI solutions from pilot into production, there needs to be a structured step-by-step approach. I don't necessarily think there's a single action, but if the pilots have done their job, they've shone a light on where the value is, where the high potential use cases sit. So I'd take that kind of small portfolio of pilots, the really high potential ones, and I'd look to kind of create the foundations for their success. I think a couple of things. Number one is about sort of data readiness, and YJ and I were talking about this last night. But really investing in the data assets of the organization. That's getting data organized, making sure it's conformed, compliant with standards and sufficient quality to enable the AI application to work effectively. There is a really big piece around just hardening the data architecture across organizations as well. So making sure data is retrievable, making sure it's controlled, making sure you have the right endpoints. Sounds simple in practice, but across these large enterprises can be very, very kind of complicated to do. I think there's a piece around, secondly, kind of infrastructure readiness. And we've talked about pilots, they often exist within functions. There is a real piece around bringing those into a unified common platform, adopting a product-led approach, so thinking about proper DevOps practices, et cetera, and really sort of taking them through the cycle. And taking something from testing into production requires, again, a very kind of systematic approach. There's a piece around sort of governance of that, I think from a business perspective, making sure that AI projects have the right level of control and oversight, but aren't hindered. And they minimize time to value, but also provide the right level of progressive assurance. I think there is a huge piece around designing user experiences. That's the bit that users will see and will interface with. And it's not just about new user interfaces, new UI. It's actually about helping to redesign people's day-to-day interactions with software. So there's a huge focus on that and creating these kind of user-centric services that blend, familiar environments that people work with every day with perhaps new environments that are kind of seamlessly integrated. And I just think as a kind of underlying piece, there is a big sort of emphasis on having an appropriate level corporate sponsor. So someone who has the right level of influence in the organization, who has ownership of a clear strategy and mandate to take things forward, and also has a budget, obviously.
Just picking up on that, what you've just said there, that user experience and the corporate sponsor. AI influence. So let's just move on to the next sort of data set then. Business models and risk. 40% of respondents foresee a significant impact. We were talking about it last night on their current business model, with 24% already taking action around that. That's real key. Sticking with you, Guy, what is the realistic near-term shift on how value is perceived? I mean, in your world, tendering and pricing, is it going to go now to hours, outcomes, or even data-enabled activities?
Yeah, and I think there is this kind of evolution happening there as well, and it's at different speeds in different sectors. We are, as we shift from using AI for kind of personal productivity, we're now moving into this space where actually we're using AI to reform specific processes and activities within functions, within commercial, within project controls, within planning, within design. And actually, we're starting to reform those processes, so doing the same things better, faster, with less inputs, making people more productive. And that obviously sort of necessitates new ways of working, and it's creating these new sort of pricing archetypes that we're seeing across industry. I think from a Turner Townsend perspective and a kind of professional services perspective, one of the big things we're seeing is this move away from purely sort of time-focused models to much more of an outcome-focused approach, where value is kind of created, and therefore you're looking at the value rather than sort of time for money. Clients are increasingly asking us to bring these sort of integrated or bundled solutions, these managed services, which combine our people, our expertise, our capability, their ingrained experience, but also our frameworks, our ways of working, our processes, and those types of models, all enabled in a seamlessly integrated technology package. That's what clients are starting to expect now. It's becoming the norm rather than the kind of outlier. So that's what we're kind of focusing on.
Have you got an example of that? Are you working on a particular project?
Yeah, I have, Mark, yeah. So a good example, we've worked with Heathrow Airports for over 30 years. They're one of our major clients. We are delivering what we call a commercial intelligence platform. We definitely need to think of a new name for that, because it's not very catchy. And I'm inspired by some of the presentations this morning. But it seeks to automate and streamline some of those post-contract commercial administration and management activities that take a lot of time. They're very admin heavy. And in doing so, we'll reduce the amount of time our commercial experts spend on those activities. So working in collaboration with Heathrow, we're trying to shift the model. So the technology is paid for on a subscription basis, and actually we're then trying to shift the model. So we're trying to sort of architect this kind of leaner hub-style team that work and interact with the system, rather than having these distributed commercial experts across and owning different contracts. So we're trying to change the model from this kind of spoke-style piece to much more of a kind of integrated kind of hub approach.
Brilliant. Anne-Marie.
Hi.
Okay. We all know in our industry we work to the letter of the contract. We're a very contractual industry. From your perspective, what are the benefits and drawbacks and you see of AI impact on the infrastructure projects coming to fruition now?
I mean, the benefits are vast. It was terrific to hear Nicholas speaking this morning. He was talking about the kind of cost, quality, sustainability, productivity gap. These are all really, really vital, and they make a huge difference to how infrastructure is delivered and performed, how stakeholders price risks, all of these kinds of things, and actually what the outcomes are for communities. And you see it's quite a low bar, because 78% of the survey saying that they would consider themselves very early adopters. So if you just look at that kind of time, cost, quality, sustainability opportunity in itself, it's absolutely enormous. Because we know, and it's not for me to say as a lawyer, but we know that this has been a relatively slow adopter in general compared to other industries. So there's a huge opportunity there, but the real opportunity in this is actually when you look at the connected value. So if you are able to take some of these insights from the infrastructure but share it with other data sets, I mean, that's where the real magic happens in terms of the societal value and the real return on the investment. And actually it was really, really interesting to see some of those platforms there. Actually, it's a lot of those really amazing use cases that were talked about this morning are what I call bilateral use cases. They're sort of comprised within a project. If you take that and you share it with other data centers, that is where the absolutely powerful magic happens. But of course, there are risks. I would say that. I'm a lawyer, but it's absolutely true. But I think the main risk with any project is that you, firstly, fail to deliver the purpose. You fail to deliver the value because you haven't properly defined the purpose. You lose the engagement of your stakeholders because you haven't delivered the purpose, you haven't delivered the value. And I think one of the main things is that the outcomes that your project is delivering, they're not trustworthy, they're not reliable. And that is actually a really big problem, particularly at this part of the cycle, or they're not compliant. There's another issue around legal compliance.
Well, I mean, can we have the next slide? Because that really gets, this is the bit I'm excited about, risk. Let's really focus on that. And I'm going to stay with you.
It's my favorite topic.
I'm going to stay with you that. I mean, early adoption, is what we're seeing now, what we're doing. What steps should organizations not skip, and are often skipped, that later become a blocker? How do we bake in those AI policies from day one that really gives us that transformation that we're looking for?
I think as a legal professional, my job is to set up models, to set up solutions that actually deliver outcomes. What I see missed all the time, and I was listening today to all these amazing products, Connect, Synchro, all of these unbelievable products that I wrote down as great data sharing examples. What's missed is too much focus on the technology, not enough focus on the operating model, not enough focus on the business models that are going to get parties wanting to use it. What is the benefit for them? What is the value for them? Why are they going to share their data? These are things that are often completely missed. And then when you focus on that, you really need to focus on the value, you really need to focus on the problem. And I have seen projects that have foundered because they've focused on the technology and doing something really clever rather than starting with how do we get stakeholders behind us? How do we get people wanting to participate? I think the other step is so interesting hearing you talking about data readiness. It's all of the really boring stuff around information management, good data governance, data ethics, because I did say that we needed our results to be trustworthy, we needed our results to be reliable, we also need our results to be fair, we need our results to be just. And this is where the ethics come in, particularly where you're dealing with infrastructure and our need to deliver against those sustainable development goals. And I know it's tedious, it's doing the housekeeping, but if you don't do that, it's like a house of cards. If you don't have the strong foundations, everything is going to cave in on itself.
Most definitely. I know there's conversations I've been having with industry while producing the paper and working on it, and it's very much around trust of one's own data, never mind trust of the market data. And Guy, I mean, from your perspective, from a PM perspective, what does a good AI audit trail look like?
Yeah, again, really, really important. And I think there are probably two kind of categories of audit. One is, the first is user approval for AI to undertake an action. And I think that's a really, really important piece that's often missed. But keeping a log of prompts and versions of prompts that are used and who's used them, accounted to actually user accounts. So there's a responsibility piece there. And I think then second, there is a piece on validation assurance, user approval of AI outputs as well. So there's two pieces. There's AI doing the action, and there's the output review piece. And I think there's some really practical things we can do. As I mentioned, there's the kind of prompt retrieval and versioning piece. There's a piece around continuous monitoring and so system tests of outputs. And then there's a piece around sort of fallbacks and rules about when AI should hand back to expert users, when it should carry on with things. So keeping those humans in the loop is really, really, really important.
Yeah, so it's a really good point, because we've heard the phrase, I don't know if other people heard it, the bookend, the human bookend at the beginning and the human bookend at the end. YJ, I want to just bring you in here on this, because obviously at Mott MacDonald and your drawing aspect and the design and engineering work that you're doing, how are you feeling about that audit trail as it moves forward onto projects?
Yes, so it's really important to have the audit trail, especially when it comes to AI. When we are experimenting with the AI solutions and augmenting it as part of project deliveries, if we cannot verify and clearly show that transparency to our clients, we are sort of kind of losing the trust. So in order to build that trust that we need, especially in the built environment, I think having very clear, dedicated audit trail will be very crucial.
I suppose Anne-Marie, coming back to you, that's essential for you from a legal perspective, but also the influence it puts on finance and insurance as well.
Absolutely, and this is an industry which is high risk, right? We know it's high risk, and I could name a dozen different infrastructure markets, and they've all got elements of real definable risk. And because of that, the decisions that we make are crucial, and they're critical, and they absolutely need to be explainable, okay? They absolutely need to be explainable. So you cannot risk relying on a decision that you don't understand why that decision's been made, how it's been verified, how the thinking has been done. And I think this is a really, really interesting place to look at around auditability, insurance. I loved what you said about ongoing performance management. We can't just sort of assume it's done, it's working. We've got to keep on testing, keep on making it sure it's passing that test, because everybody who is involved in this industry is concerned, and rightly so, about risk.
Perfect. And I just, anyone take on this one. But is that, we've talked about there about that sort of, shall we say, the faith and the feeling of secure data from quality aspect, having that good audit trail, does that really sort of appease that problem that's going on? Guy, YII? Do you want to take either of that?
I think it helps.
Yeah.
I think it helps. There's always a level of expert responsibility.
Yeah.
And it always comes back to people operating machines. We're doing some experiments at the moment, for example, where we are trying to understand everything that an AI does. So having these really extensive traceability logs, everything from the kind of financial operations and how much it costs to review a contract, for example, and summarize it. So it's that kind of financial traceability, what data it's pulling from and retrieving from different sources, what context it's used. And we're trying to build these system tests that we can use to kind of verify outputs. And those kind of tests need to be modeled and remodeled as you kind of go along and you use AI more and understand it more to make sure they're still relevant, they're still giving you the right results as well. So there's a really important piece there.
Cool, lovely. I think, as I said, it's a really exciting aspect of the work. So let's go on to the last part of the paper and around sort of the next 3 years and what's going to go on in the next 3 years. YJ, I mean, where do you see organizations focusing their investment in the coming months, coming years?
I think that's natural progress from our previous discussion. When the AI boom began, a lot of organizations jumped right into AI solution experimentations and development. And after that, they quickly realized that without having strong foundations, as we've been emphasizing, deploying AI solutions can only amplify ineffectiveness without really seeing the actual value. So many organizations, this is very, very well reflected as we are seeing that more and more organizations are going back to the foundation. Yep. That's data, definitely the key element, data and process and standardization. That could mean that starting from having a common data schema or taxonomies when it comes to describing project information or internal knowledge, or it could be having some sort of kind of consistency when it comes to tagging information such as documents and designs and any lesson learned across projects, whether that's water sector or transport or energy sector. If we can describe with the same systematic, consistent way our learning, and it really amplifies the value of the data. And the third thing is that more and more companies are adopting the idea of open data model. I think we heard a lot of the word data interoperability this morning during the keynote session as well. And that's really key, because if we can bring the data in this fragmented environment, that we can describe the data with this consistent format, with the same meaning, then really we can unlock the value of the data. And a lot of companies also investing in automating data quality and validation checks. That means if we can ensure the data quality remain, it's not about just doing once, but we have to maintain the quality consistently before they get actually consumed by the various downstream systems. That's really, that's like a continuous ongoing performance.
Well, that exactly goes back to the earlier point, confidence in one's own
Yeah.
data. Guy, do you have any thoughts on that particular topic?
I mean, yeah, just to echo what YJ said, completely agree. And we're doing exactly the same thing.
Okay, cool, brilliant, thank you. So with investments being directed towards enhancing technical capabilities and also workforce skills, we haven't even covered that yet, and that's a whole new topic. What is the most effective way of learning pathway that you've seen, Guy, for new entrants into the marketplace?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic around sort of talent and reskilling and upskilling. We're not necessarily expecting project professionals to become data scientists. That's an unrealistic expectation. We are looking for them to become more data and AI literate. As YJ was saying, being able to treat data as a valuable asset, as a thing to value, being able to tag things and label things correctly so it can be used in an onward chain is really, really important. We're also sort of doubling down on their technical skills to provide that kind of assurance functionality. And I think from a kind of learning pathway perspective, again, we're trying a lot and we're seeing what works. The things that really work from my perspective so far, one is kind of functional working groups. So creating kind of working groups of interested individuals, working with technical teams, so that they can progressively upskill and they go out and then become super users and can actually train and influence others within the organization, and particularly within their functions. I think that's a really, really effective way, and keeping those working groups running for as long as is needed. And I think the other piece we're seeing is being quite effective is embedding data and AI professionals into project teams. So you have an expert working with functional users, project professionals, and there is this kind of two-way pollination of knowledge. They're helping to teach data literacy and improve the professional's understanding, and equally they're understanding the domain and how things work and why they work that way. So those two things I think are proving really effective for us.
Okay, taking that on and going down that skills route, I think it's a question for each and every one of you, because your roles and organisations are so different. What are going to be the sought-after roles in this sort of next 3 years? And can you just give us a bit of background on why you think those roles are going to be important? Can we start with you, Anne-Marie?
Well, because I know YJ and Guy are both focused on technical, as are a lot of you in this room, I'm going to focus on two of the non-technical things that I think you need to deal with, and they're going to be focused more around business models. First of all, you need people who understand how to drive collaboration. It sounds really easy. I don't know who here in this room has ever been involved in a multi-party data sharing arrangement. You will quickly find out it's not easy, right? People need to understand why they should be collaborating, how they should collaborate, and aligning the behaviors is actually complex. And this is absolutely, in my opinion, a gap. The second thing, and I'm going to pick up on what you said about value, because I thought that was so interesting, and you picked up on that as well, Guy, is around, it's a sort of economic valuation profession that I can see emerging, and I know there's some consultancies who are really specializing in this already about how you value the benefits, because this supports the business models, right? The CEO of a company who's putting money into a digital twin project, they don't actually care about the technical governance. What they want to understand is where's the value, where's the benefit, and that all needs to, in some way, translate into numbers and finance and things that they understand.
Perfect. Guy?
Yeah. Excuse me. I completely agree with that, Anne-Marie, actually. I think over the next couple of years, 3 years in particular, we're going to start seeing humans as the luxury rather than AI and technology as the luxury. So I think they will see this kind of pivot. So actually, just to echo what you said, those kind of human skills, being able to manage change, being able to engage stakeholders effectively, I think will become increasingly important. I think the other thing that will be really important is that people are doubling down on their technical skills. So, that domain knowledge, being a really, really good scheduler or planner, being a really, really great engineer, that's not going to go out of fashion. In fact, I think it's going to be even more amplified, and we need to sort of double down on that kind of technical space. And I think from a more technical sort of digital angle, what we're seeing is it's much easier now to produce software and solutions that have AI incorporated. It's very, very difficult to do it well. So anyone can really sort of engineer new software, can build LLMs into what they're doing, can use Copilot. So I think there is this kind of technical sort of AI sort of dev pods kind of forming, and they need to be integrated with wider sort of business units. So we're investing a lot in that. We're seeing almost like a re-professionalization of our sort of digital team and digital function to really focus on the technical skills, but also, as Anne-Marie and YJ both said, data ethics, responsible development, AI ethics and such.
Definitely. YJ, what do you see those new roles being?
Well, I agree everything that has been mentioned and build on top of it. From group perspective, I'll add 2 more roles. So
Please.
one is AI governance role. So we can ensure that our AI adoption is secure, responsible, transparent, and fair and ethic. The other role is my role. AI technical role. So a lot of companies are now moving away from experimentation into deployment and then actually using in practical sense. So in that perspective, I think it's important that we ensure that those solutions are technically sound, compliant, and well integrated into existing digital infrastructure.
Brilliant, thank you. It's really interesting to see where your focus is going with those new roles. It's really around the assurance and that sort of safety aspect of it. The guardrails, I think someone might call it. So, okay, one final question, and then we will wrap up, I promise you. You all are writing now your CEO's 6-month report on AI agenda. What are the top 3 lines from each one of you?
Good question.
Who'd like to go first? Do you want to go first?
I'll go just because I'm next to you and I've already started. First one would be focus on purpose. Purpose in order to define the problem, in order to then define the value. The second one is collaboration. This is going to be so much more powerful, all these amazing tools that people like Bentley are building, if you have more data within the system. And I think the third one is just the trust, reliability, accountability, trustworthiness in all ways.
Yeah, and I think our agenda point is going to be overlapping here, Mark. But yeah, my 3. So the first one, I think, echoing Anne-Marie, would be all around those kind of high-impact use cases. What are the big bets? What are the most valuable areas to invest in AI that align to business objectives? So I'd be looking at that from a kind of functional perspective about what the business does and where the most impact could be realised. The second piece, as we mentioned, is hardening up that kind of data architecture, and investing in the collection and management of data assets, changing the culture so it kind of treats those data assets as valuable things, and sort of investing in the technology around that as well. And I think thirdly, I'd be looking at talent culture and sort of the organizational readiness, because actually that's a huge piece. How are disciplines within organizations being redefined and rewired through artificial intelligence? How are we changing the way we deliver services to clients? How are we changing the way collectively we deliver large infrastructure programs and projects, and how we manage asset portfolios? I'd be looking at how our organization is geared up to evolve into this new space.
Brilliant. YJ?
My 3 things are, the first one is data. Start with the data that the company believes that it's strategically important. Even if it's inconsistent or incomplete, that's okay if it has the potential to be competitive advantage. The second thing is the governance. Make sure that governance becomes an enabler rather than a blocker, focusing on the principles rather than rules. The last thing is the people. We have to respect that people will have different pathways to adopt AI, depending on their roles and responsibilities and comfort level with the technology. So we need to respect that. We got to bring contextual learning and maybe role-specific training.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, it takes me now to say thank you very much to the 3 of you for joining us today and getting your insights. I'm really appreciative of it. And also, what I would like to say in writing this paper and pulling together, it's been really interesting. We've done a number of events to the side of it, and getting people's feelings, and actually it's becoming a very emotive topic and a very sort of passionate topic. So I'm expecting this passion to actually drive into industry and actually bring the change that we so much need. So I would like to thank you all for attending. Hopefully you've seen the session and the topic is extremely engaging. And with that, I'd like to thank and bring Nathan to the stage. Good.
Wow, it doesn't get much more real than that. Thank you, Anne-Marie, Guy, YJ, and of course, Mark. What a great discussion on AI and its impact in our industry. And I think back to my time as a chief digital officer and a contractor and as a global engineering firm, it's now getting real and it's really here. So it's clear that AI is already transforming how we solve infrastructure challenges in real and tangible ways across every sector. I encourage you all, like we touched on this morning, to now think about how you can put those best practices into your ways of working and take them home into your projects, whether it's accelerating design, streamlining or de-risking construction, or optimizing your asset operations across your portfolio. And just as important, think on how you can share these lessons from these experts across this broader community. Collaboration and shared knowledge are what will push us all forward. So as we all head into the afternoon, here's a look at what's coming up so you can plan your day. We'll take a quick break shortly, then after lunch, the spotlight shifts to the industry breakout sessions, where you can choose from 3 concurrent tracks focused on transportation, energy production, or cities. Then later in the afternoon, we'll be looking at another round of industry breakout sessions involving water, mining, and electric utilities. These deep dives are your chance to connect with peers and experts working on solutions that matter in your sector. And for those involved in the AI forum activities, remember there are private innovation tours, focus sessions, and networking breaks designed to maximize your experience. And don't forget to visit the iLab, sponsored by Google. It's a really great place to explore hands-on, live demonstrations of our technology that's driving breakthroughs in project delivery. And after a full day, then it's time to unwind and connect with your colleagues and peers at the networking reception starting at 7 p.m. It's the perfect setting to relax, network, and keep the conversations going. Before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to everyone in the room and who's joined us online today. Your energy and participation help make this event truly global. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I look forward to catching up with many of you later this evening. Thank you.